Good evening. It's nice to be here with you for this. Well, the subject for tonight is not necessarily so happy subject, but thank you for taking your time to join us for this discussion. As you could see in the invitation, it's going to be more interactive discussion. So if you expect me to deliver you some answers, I hate to disappoint you, but I don't think that the Jewish community worldwide delivered one answer. We delivered, let me see precisely how many, at least 17 answers. No, wait, 21. 21 different answers to this question: why did God allow the Holocaust to happen, and where was God during the Holocaust? The major rabbis and Jewish philosophers, at least the recent couple decades, they were telling that we don't. That's the question we don't have an answer for. So that's going to be more interactive discussion for us to see what we feel, what we think about it. In fact, I don't think that we can deliver the answer with one certainty, one certain answer. It's probably not possible. Anyway, you saw a few things about myself in the invitation. I'm bouncing between Germany and Dallas. At the moment in Dallas, I'm teaching, and in Germany, I'm leading a non-profit organization, and I'm a rabbi of a Messianic congregation in Berlin, Germany. So, like last week, I was in Germany. This week, I'm in Dallas. End of next week, I'm in Germany again. So being exposed to different countries in Europe and here in the United States, and encountering much of anti-Semitism, the Holocaust is certainly an issue, not just the past, but also it has some relevance for the Jewish life even today. Not just because it's part of our identity of who we are, Jewish people. Remembering Holocaust, even in the United States, is the key identity marker of the Jewish people. Not just because of that it's relevant, but because there is a growing fear among Jewish people worldwide that something like that can happen again. And although we keep telling never again, and we try to hear from different politicians to say the same, and we love people and even Christians telling that it has never happened to happen again, there is a growing fear, particularly in Europe, particularly in the current circumstances regarding Israel and Middle East crisis, and with many Muslims moving to European Union countries. So the Holocaust is the main part of our Jewish identity, who we are. It determines our Jewish identity and belonging to the Jewish people, but also it's part of our fear regarding the future. This answer for the question, where was God, is becoming very significant question, not just in dealing with the past, but also with us looking in the future. Well, let me, as a starter, read you quickly some Jewish answers given to that. Somebody summarized them. First answer after the Holocaust: God is dead. So if God would be alive, if there would be God, Holocaust would never take place. Second possible answer given by some Jewish philosophers, they call, like Martin Buber, they call it the eclipse of God. So God is there, He exists, but for certain times in history He disappears. So He disengaged Himself from the history and from the dealing with the history. Third, a distant God. A God who just can do everything, knows everything, almighty, all knowledgeable, just he's all powerful, but at the certain time, moment in time, he made the decision to retreat himself from dealing in the history. Fourth, a limited God. God is not omnipotent, so he is not the one who can do everything. He has limited power. Fifth, free will and God. So God let people have free will, and we do whatever we want to do, and it's all up to us to decide. God said, I delegated to you, you deal with that. I'm not going to intervene. 6, a suffering God. Interestingly, it's considered to be borrowed from the Christian theology, this idea of the suffering God, the God who may be limited in power, but he suffers and is compassionate with the people who suffer. So he suffers with the Jewish people, but please keep in mind, he is limited. 7th, Jewish survival, to show that Jewish people will survive anyway, and we are to fight for our survival. 8, incomprehensible silence. With other words, God was silent, but we don't know why. It just was a time of the divine silence. 9, a theology of protest. If the Holocaust is a mystery, it's horrific what happened. So it's
that again.
A theology of protest.
Okay.
So it's God he's sort of like, he's not so good, not as good as we thought he is. It's just like he can do evil, and we don't like this God, sort of. For those of you who came a little bit later, I'm mentioning some Jewish conclusions, 21 summarized Jewish conclusions as possible answer to this question. And then a broken covenant. So God broke his covenant with the Jewish people. For me, well, you understand, it's a very liberal Jewish view. So God brought the covenant with his people. Now we can keep the Torah, but it's not obligatory any longer because God has already broke the covenant with us. 11, providential history. So some suggested that the Shoah had the providential outcome of overturning old medieval Jewish structure. So it's like God was trying to create everything new. So the old structure of the Jewish people and old lifestyle is to be replaced with the new. And unfortunately, it was done in this radical way. Just keep in mind, all these views are done by different types of Jewish philosophers and rabbis. These are not views that were imposed or brought into the into the discussion by Gentiles or Christians or anti-Semites. These are all Jewish views. It's suffering. 12. It's suffering on behalf of others. Isaiah 53, chapter about that Christians or believers in Jesus consider the chapter that is fulfilled in Jesus, so suffering servant. For the Jewish people, for about 1,000 years, this is the chapter about Israel suffering for other nations. And the Holocaust was like pinnacle of this suffering. Next, coming of the Messiah. Some religious Orthodox Jewish philosophers, they said that it's like birth pains of the Messiah's coming. Because the Orthodox Jewish tradition believes that before it will get better, it has to get radically worse, everything. So there is like a great tribulation in Jewish mindset, not just in certain Christian theologies, but also in Jewish mindset. There is a great tribulation that is immediately preceding the coming of the Messiah. So the Holocaust was an indication that the Messiah is near. Next, because of our sins, we were punished. It's a punishment for our sin. Again, it's Orthodox Jewish view. Not all Orthodox Jews think this way, but it's a very widely represented view among Orthodox Jews, saying that Holocaust is the punishment of for the European Jews, for the assimilation, for the liberalism, for abandoning the ways of God, and also ultimately something what was predicted in the Torah itself. For example, in Deuteronomy chapter 28 or Leviticus chapter 16. So it's what was predicted as a judgment for disobedience. Next, one more tragedy. So Jewish people were exposed to different tragedies in the history. Holocaust was not the first one, and unfortunately not the last one, according to this view. So there were catastrophic events in the past in the Jewish history, not just in the last 2,000 years, but also previously. That's why we have special fasting days, as the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av. We remember on different catastrophic events in Jewish history. But also, if you look in the recent past, I mean, before the Holocaust, like pogroms in Russia, expulsion of Jewish people from Spain and Portugal, and also crusaders and killing all the Jewish people and different wars. So it's one more tragedy that we see, not the first and probably not the last one. Next one is Jewish Reconstruction. It was a reminder for the Jewish people. The Holocaust was the reminder for the Jewish people to get back to their Jewish identity and to fight for their identity. So we need to fight for our lives, for our well-being, and we need to survive. It's when some idea from the previous centuries came also to light more specifically. If the Jewish people will not help themselves, nobody will. So we need to take care of ourselves and of our survival. That's something what was behind the uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto. Also, we got to fight. And some Jewish philosophers think that Holocaust helped with that. Next one is it's like Christian responsibility. It was done for Christians to to understand that they're responsible, and to understand their anti-Semitism, and to understand all the suffering they caused to the Jewish people. And for those of you who don't know Jewish mentality well enough, Holocaust was done by Christians in Jewish mindset, because generally every white Gentile is a Christian. In Europe, at least, it was the assumption. So Nazis were Christians. Hitler was a Christian in the Jewish mindset. That's why Holocaust was something made by Christians.
How widespread is that?
Sorry?
How widespread?
Very widely spread. It's just like I would say now. Things are changing. When in Israel, the Israelis, they consider evangelical Christians to be their friends, the friends of Israel. And in the United States, there are some attempts, again, by Christians and by evangelical Christians to do something good for the Jewish people and to support Jewish people. But still, the majority, they assume that the church is guilty in what happened during the Holocaust. And even when the Pope, the Catholic Church, says something good or something like remorse or apology for the Holocaust, the Jewish people usually feel that's right. You are guilty of all this. So it's very widespread. It's, I would say, probably not less than 90% of the assumption. So, and Holocaust is the reminder.
I was just wondering, was the reason that the Christians persecuted the Jews during the Holocaust was the revenge for crucifying their Savior? Is that what they think the motive was for Christians to?
No, they don't think it's not necessary that it's thought this way particularly. It's a whole complex. We don't attempt to understand anti-Semitism. We just assume that it's everywhere. The Jewish philosophers were not dealing with the core of anti-Semitism. In fact, in the recent, the Catholics did more in this regard than Jewish people. For example, the previous Pope Benedict, he did speeches about the Holocaust and why it happened, and about Nazis and anti-Semitism as an attempt to kill the God of Israel. So to take out the roots, they will uproot the ethic, so the Judeo-Christian values. So Christians, there are some Christian philosophers and theologians who are dealing with anti-Semitism in its theological and sociological understanding more than the Jewish people. We just feel like we sense we live in this environment. That's it. So without understanding what was the reason particularly behind that, Christians did the Holocaust. That's it. Or they were heavily involved in that. So next is Jewish responsibility. We suffered so much, so now we need to be better in helping others in their suffering. And so we understand what suffering is. That's why we need to do so much for social justice, for fighting against racism and discrimination, and etc. That's why most of the Jewish people in the Western Hemisphere, so to speak, in Western world, and in the United States, usually we're good people. We fight for social justice. We fight for those oppressed. We support liberational attempts, etc. So that's also like result of some understanding why did Holocaust happen and what was the God's position regarding that. Next one is Jewish witness. It's witness of survival. So we survive. We survived the Holocaust, and we survive. We will survive again and forever, and we stick to our God. So it's our witness that we are not abandoning our Jewish identity and not abandoning our God. That's also one of Jewish views on that. And next one, God's. I have a little bit difficulties to understand this one. Probably I should read more about that. But it's like God's female face. It's not that I have something against female. No, not at all. But it's just it's feministic theology in the Jewish community, and it's like. Well, women suffer. There female Jewish philosopher who said that females, they suffered the most during the Holocaust. They took the most hardship of that, and God showed by that in His suffering also His like feminine nature. And the last one, no theology after Holocaust. So no theology in Auschwitz. It assumes that we are not to theologize anything. It's just like we are done with that. It was like the pinnacle of everything, and just stop theologizing, stop even think about it, just live, survive, go on. So these are 21 views that I found summarized by somebody. If you need the link, I can send you this link. Now, as I said, it's a little bit more like a discussion or interaction. I want to open the floor for you also to share your opinion. Maybe it's 22nd or 23rd, or just anything regarding this 21st mentioned, or in addition to that. Any comments? Why do you think God let it happen? Where was God during the Holocaust?
You mentioned the Christians are to understand that they're to blame. This is a particular view. Would those same Jews that hold that view, how would they view the righteous Gentiles? Would they be exceptions to this general rule, or do they view that they were still part of the problem as well? Well, we very dearly appreciate those who helped us or was helping us. Jewish community and Israel has done a lot to acknowledge and recognize righteous Gentiles who were saving Jewish people. We know of and we appreciate those heroes of the Holocaust who were rescuing Jewish people even on expense of their own life. But we think that it was the minority among the people. So and now I'm not talking about that Jewish view, but just touching on this subject a little bit more. Like in Germany, the church was silent. If we are talking about Christians, the church was mostly silent. There were some people who went to jail and to concentration camp, Christians, because they were trying to theologically protect Jewish people. Like Dietrich Bonhoeffer is one of them. It was not just Jewish issue with him, but among other things he was fighting for was the issue of anti-Semitism. He was not the only one, but probably the most famous one. But the majority of Christians, they kept silent.
There was, even before Hitler came to power, there was formed like a society, I would say in English, it's probably, society of so-called German Christians. Deutsche Christen in German. Even today, I cannot tell like this term. I cannot easily use this terminology, German Christian, because it was a special group growing like a movement of Christians in Germany who were extremely anti-Semitic. And before Hitler came to power, they came up with some statements against Jewish people. And this statement went so far that one of the positions was, we are not to share the gospel with the Jewish people. So we are not to evangelize Jews, because by bringing them into the Christianity, we spoil the royal blood of the German church, so to speak. So we integrate them in our society by spreading the gospel to the Jewish people. So we got to stop it. As Hitler came to power, the church in Germany, I mean to its majority, like evangelical church, it's not evangelical in American sense, Lutheran church in Germany embraced all these statements. There was an institute created in Germany to get everything Jewish from the Bible and from Christian theology, to purify Christianity from everything Jewish. So the church was just behind that, and mostly by indifference. Some were strongly in favor of all this, but mostly just, I don't care. That was the problem with the church. Like in Berlin, there were only like 2 or 3 churches that let Jewish Christians come and celebrate the communion. Only 2 or 3 churches, because otherwise it was prohibited. Even like there was one Baptist church that let Jewish people in, only one. And there was one Lutheran church that let Jewish people in. All Jewish pastors of different churches were kicked out, and most of them went to concentration camps. So sorry that it took so much time to talk about this subject on Christianity, but even Jewish people like myself, who believe in Jesus and see ourselves not just as a part of the Jewish people, but also as the part of the church or the body of the Messiah. We suffered as well because of the church that time. So I don't want to be so negativistic, but I want to mention some very important, although I thought that I will mention it at the end, but anyway, because we are talking about this. The question where was God during the Holocaust, it could be better sometimes to rephrase in the question, where were we? So regarding Christian, where was the church? Regarding the politics, where were the politicians? Regarding leaders in the society, where were they? So the question should be also considered. Yes, please.
Vladimir, just a quick interchange between you and I a minute. The Jews believe in God. They believe that He is creator of all things. Right? And they believe that God created them. Am I correct on all of that? That the God who created this also would create
there is.
I didn't know that I like the word create, but that there is God, a God that they have always known and have always acclaimed as God, and He's in a place of being in charge. Is that true?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's to a part it's true,
Okay.
but there are some Jewish people. There are Jewish people who believe that God is creator of everything. Do you see? Do you see my point? There are Jewish people. Some, not everybody. I mean, the majority of the Jewish people in the United States, they don't believe in that.
And then my next.
That's why, just addressing this. Yeah, it's most of the views that I mentioned in this list are brought up by the Jewish people and philosophers who are not necessarily believing that God is omnipotent, that He exists, that He is creator of everything.
And so if there is God who created all things and the Holocaust was allowed, I know that Jews don't really, how do I say this? It's interesting to me that they can fault Christians, Gentiles who did not help during the Holocaust, but will still accept God. If He is always in control, and He did allow, and yet they will push aside Christianity, and yet who was really ultimately in charge is God. And so I'm just pondering the fact that why is God at fault?
Why is it God's fault?
Isn't it? Why isn't God at fault? They can make Christians at fault. Who is God to them?
Well, that's.
What do they do with that position that they're still going to worship and want to suppress?
Yeah, that's. Well, good point. Let's keep the discussion. Interaction. So not me just replying, but let's talk about that for a
I
while.
wanted to affirm something you said earlier. And a minute ago you said you didn't want to be so negative or something. So here's something positive. And then I'm going to come to your point. You said earlier that the history of the Holocaust for many American Jews or Western Jews has driven them to support social justice. And I just want to give an example of that. I have been trained, I'm a Christian, but I was trained by the American Jewish Committee to be a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. for comprehensive immigration reform by Jewish leaders here in Dallas. They reached out to the Latino community to cultivate relationships with leaders and to help us because they identify with marginalized and oppressed people. And they view immigration reform as something that is needed and that people are being exploited. And so they actually found us. They went throughout the Dallas community and recruited Hispanic leaders. And it's American Jews that trained me to be a lobbyist in Washington. And it's out of this thing that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So that really helped me connect the dots. So that's positive, I think.
Okay.
To your point, madam, one of my daughters graduated from a Jewish university, Brandeis University in Boston. And so she now has a Jewish boyfriend. And I've been working with these Jewish people, doing lobbying for 10 years. And what I can tell you, and Vladimir, you may want to correct me or weigh in, as Christians, we are wrong to assume that Jews believe in a God like we do, and that they have a high view of the Old Testament like we do. And that is a fatal flaw in the way we think. If we've been raised in the church, and we revere the Creator God, and we revere the Word, most American Jews do not do both of those things. My experience has been that American Jews are secular, many of them are agnostic, some of them are even atheists. But we shouldn't take our worldview and impose it on Jews and assume or presume that they think like we do. Because my experience has been they're secular, and they don't believe in the God of the Bible, and they don't hold the Old Testament in high regard like we do. That's been my experience.
Yeah, it's certainly part of the picture, very significant part of the picture. When I tell my story, I tell that I'm the third generation of Jewish atheists, because my parents don't believe in God, my grandparents never believed in God, and I was raised without believing in God. But very strong Jewish identity. Very clear Jewish identity. So you don't need to believe in God of Israel to be Jewish. Well, not just at the current, not even in the history. If you consider the Jewish kings in the Bible, in Tanakh, in the Old Testament, they didn't believe. In many cases, they didn't believe in God. They believed in many gods, and still they were Jewish kings. As the king Solomon abandoned the God of Israel, he's still Shlomo the king. So he's I would agree with that. Don't assume that being Jewish means automatically believing in the God of Israel. But I don't want us to distract or derail in this type of discussion. We want to stick to the question that we are trying to deal tonight, namely, where was God during the Holocaust? And then here, there, and there. Yes, please.
Well, through my experience, when I watch those movies or learn about history, about the healer, and also I learned from the Bible about what God, who is God, how God is. And it's just like, I was thinking about from the God created those angels, the Lucifer, he become evil, right? So he put all those evil, the healer, he was follow the evil. And then so grace others follow him, they want the power, they all follow the evil. So that's why create all those, evil doer, kill all those Jewish. But the time, I think, not just only Jewish, even in Italy or whatever, there's a lot of people that killed, but Jewish is the majority. And I think it's very horrible because the healer, he was so powerful and so cruelly. And just like at the time, like the Assyrians, those empires, how they kill people. And very cruelly. And God wiped them all, remember? So that nation is gone now. But talk about healer. When I watch all those movies, how many people he had killed because him, he kind of represents, he is just like the devil. To me, God is not law. I guess he's the bottle. Sometimes I see soap and it kind of made me feel like, where is God? So I ask myself, am I really believe, if God is in control? Sometimes I get afraid of my own life too, because there's a danger every place.
Yeah, let me comment on that really quickly. It's I would say God is in control, because I believe in the omnipotent God who is the creator of everything, and Jewish people are the proof of his existence, actually. It was also used by Christian philosophers in the past. They were using Jewish survival
the survival of the Jewish people in spite of all the tragedies as the evidence of the God of Israel. So from this standpoint, Holocaust is also a testimony of God's existence. They tried to kill us. They killed 6 million, but they never succeeded. So it's something. Yeah, exactly. So please, Bruce.
Just getting back to what she brought up. I've heard this. I haven't seen the statistics on it. I'm sure you know it well, but isn't it in fact true that after the Holocaust, that agnosticism and atheism really ramped up amongst Jewish people? Many Jewish people just abandoned the idea of theistic God.
Not exactly. Why not exactly? It was before. European Jews, they were assimilating in huge numbers before the Holocaust. Some Orthodox Jewish rabbis said that, and I mentioned that to some extent previously in one of the views, Holocaust was a punishment. Again, it's not specifically my view, but I'm mentioning this view. It's a punishment for the assimilation. And I consider that as a part of the whole picture. European Jews were assimilating in huge numbers. In Germany, probably one more generation and there would not be Jewish people. In Holland as well. So it was very strong assimilation. In the Soviet Union, very strong assimilation as well. In Poland, still very significant Orthodox Jewish community. But otherwise, just consider couple years before, like 2 centuries before the Holocaust happened. 2 million of Jewish people over 2 million, but huge number, like 1 or 2 million, 1 million at least, over 200 years converted to Christianity, just in one single city in Germany, Berlin. More than 1 million, so like very huge number. Most of them were converting to Christianity not because they believed in Jesus, but because they tried to become Germans. So the assimilation was extremely strong, and Reformed Judaism was born in Germany, like several decades before Holocaust happened. So the assimilation and abandoning the God of Israel and his way of life given to the Jewish people happened earlier than that.
So assimilation.
And the statistics for Jewish Americans you can find in something like Pew Survey report. It's there. I'm trying to follow the hands raised, and then the hand there, and then you.
I think that God is ultimately in control, but He is allowing discontrol until Jesus returns again. And I believe He's allowing this time frame to come about because people are being born and they need to experience life on the planet to make the decision if they're going to choose Jesus as their Lord or not. And so Satan knows that his time is out, and because he is the prince of the air, he has some power over the planet right now, even though God is allowing him to have this control. So in a sense, God is allowing his control, but in the end, God will win.
It's a very valid biblical view on that, particularly in the New Testament. It mentioned that as Jesus was coming to Jerusalem, he was weeping over Jerusalem, and he mentioned some catastrophic events that are going to happen, and he said, if you would even this day know what serves to your peace, but it's hidden from your eyes. And in other passages, Jesus was telling to Jerusalem, how many times I tried to bring you under my wings and you didn't want. So it's there is certain biblical legitimacy if you read and believe what is written in the New Testament. However, I would be very careful in using that with the Jewish people, because many tragedies in the Jewish history happened because of this statement. Most of the pogroms and killing of the Jewish people, accusations, were done based upon the Christian messages found in the New Testament, including Jews crucified Jesus. You are blinded. You rejected the Messiah. You are cursed. So things like this, and even saying Jesus phrases like "Your house remains empty now, since now." It was used against Jewish people. In fact, it was used to prepare the foundation for the Holocaust. Last year, Christianity celebrated 500 years of Reformation, and Luther, for example, great man, in many respects, also great anti-Semite. He was furiously anti-Semitic against Jewish people, and these were also the ideas he was using against Jewish people. So if we want to see that as a reason for the Holocaust, and I know that, and I'm not talking to you directly, so I don't take it as personal, but if we consider that as a biblical reason for the Holocaust to happen, before we consider that, we need to pray for God to give us a huge love for the Jewish people. And only with love we can take this idea not as an accusation, but in the same way Jesus did it. Namely, he wept. Christians were killing Jews with these statements, and Jesus was weeping because he knew that. So the heart has to be broken for the Jewish people first, and then before starting considering these ideas. And again, don't take it personally. Just using that as something to.
It's God's children.
Right.
Jewish, you know.
Let me respond to the hands raised. So.
I wanted to mention that recently I read a statement from one of the Jewish believers, Messianic Jewish believers in Israel, that, as you were saying, there's a fear that rather than never again that is happening again, but with the rise of terrorism, especially in certain areas that feel very vulnerable, she is saying that the Jewish people have put their faith in the IDF and military power in America, in politics and politicians and diplomacy, but not in the God of Israel. And even those who are believers in God have put their understanding in rabbinical dictates rather than in the Word of God. And I know that the Bible is taught in school, but really sort of like a history rather than a faith. And so they're at a loss for what to think to do while they're seeing this all this terror rise again. And what they wanted to believe who said that it could never happen again, but that fear is rising because what they see is the lying, and they don't have anything really substantial to fall back on, and this question still persists.
Yeah, so following that, I would say, listening to what you just said, I would say it's good when Jewish people ask the question, where was God during the Holocaust? Because at least they consider the God of Israel. So this now, after what you mentioned, and I agree with you, I like this question. I like the word God being brought into the play here, or just into discussion. So that's a good thing. By the way, talking about this statement that done by some Jewish scholars that we need to help ourselves. So we need to get stronger and take responsibility even for survival of our nation. Jewish community in Europe was not destroyed. Praise God, I would add. It was not destroyed entirely, not because of the Jewish people helped themselves so well. Because the Jewish people were not in the condition to fight for themselves. And even strong American Jewish community tried to convince the government of the United States at that time to do something to help and to rescue Jewish people and to bomb the concentration camps. But even the Jewish community, influential Jewish community in the United States on political level and in the society, couldn't do anything to help the European Jews. So only God could help. So I would say that we need to bring the word God and the concept of God into discussion, especially with the Reform or liberal or atheistic, agnostic Jewish people. Here and then there. Okay.
I'm sort of curious why, out of those 20-something reasons, that giving the land of Israel to the Jews was not mentioned. Is that not obviously it happened. If it didn't happen as a result of the Holocaust, it was a huge coincidence.
It's a very good question. Thank you for bringing it up. I haven't, well, now after this question I wonder myself, but I sense the answer that could be given to this. Jewish people in the diaspora, they don't care too much about Israel. And for you this question is significant, and this concept, and Israel as a miracle, is significant because you probably more like, don't take it as an offense, just as something positive. You're probably like sort of like evangelical Christian, right?
Sort of.
And that's a compliment. The number of evangelical Christians in United States, considering that Israel is given to the Jewish people by God, and it's like a miracle that it happened, is twice higher than among Jewish people percentage-wise. Only maximum 40% of the Jewish people in the United States consider Israel as the land given by God, and 80% of evangelical Christians. So it's not such a big issue for considering. Besides, for the Orthodox Jews, for many Orthodox Jews, Israel is not a good country. They would not support Israel at all and Israel's existence. So like those Jewish people wearing black hats and black jackets and white shorts, they are not supportive for Israel. They think that it's sinful Israel. This Israel doesn't necessarily have the rights to exist. Because the Israel that we're expecting is the Israel of the Messiah. So that's why probably that's some reasons why it's not mentioned there. But I will fully agree with you that that's a miracle, and that's some positive consequence of the Holocaust, although we cannot put it together. Sometimes some Christian Christian theologians, or just like Christian scholars talking with Jewish community, made this mistake. They put it like on the same level. For the Jewish people it sounds like that. Oh, it's no problem that you lost your child. You will get another one. So it's just like 6 million. That's tragic, but look what you got instead. Don't put it together. Just these are two separate. And I know you don't, but I'm telling all of us. Just let's separate these two from one another.
Christians, they love Israel because they think it's a place of Jesus' birth, and they believe the land is given by God, and all His children, God's children, all can share the part of the blessing of that land. And so that's why they send money there, they do church there, especially one time I heard Joe Austin, he said they put so much money, in Israel to build the housing, for Jewish people. And then one time a lady, she go to a Methodist church. She told me, have you ever been to Israel? I said, no. She said, you should go. Israel is ours. I said, it's ours? Oh, I don't understand. But anyway, for me now, I can sense it probably because see all this stuff going, and they say, oh, probably because they all think because Israel is God's property. So everybody, as long as you are God's child, then they think that belongs to them too, like an inheritance.
Well, Israel is, I do believe that Israel, the land, belongs to God, and God decided to give it to the people of Israel, to the Jewish people, for good, to use. It's not ours. It's not Jewish land. It's even not like promised land. It's God's land. That is also given land, given to the Jewish people for eternal possession. So,
a lot of people think that because they didn't hear the Lord speak during that intertestamental period, the Old Testament, New Testament, between Scriptures and the New Covenant, there was nothing written down, so that God was silent for 400 years. He didn't say anything. But it's not like he took a vacation. He was doing everything that needed to be done to set the stage for the Messiah to come. And just as he is always with his overarching plan, he is working everything out that can't be thwarted, can't be changed. He has a plan. And it's not to be interrupted. And it's very difficult to say for certain, looking back, that you see everything that, where God's hand was on this and he made that. You don't really know all the intricacies of what he's doing, even when we can see a little bit of a glimmer of them here and there. So, during the Holocaust, he could see way beyond, just like the whole body of Messiah grows when it's persecuted, one way or another. There's something that happens when the heat is turned up that not only builds character, builds faith, but builds hope. He was doing something because he's never on vacation. He never sleeps. And his hand is on his people.
I agree with that, and I also personally I agree that God is never silent. And instead, probably instead of blaming him for being silent, we need to blame us for inability to listen. But he is never silent.
Too much fear to respond, which is what happened to many of the people, and many true believers in the church did not respond.
Well, right, but talking of the Holocaust, we all can understand the Jewish sense that he is not talking, he is silent, and the frustration, because when we have some trouble, we need him. Even the atheists, they cry out to something. Or somebody. There is a crying out. But all times there was here and there. Please raise your hand if you want to say something.
Go back to who is God to the Jewish people. The present day rabbis who are teaching in Israel today, who do or don't esteem the census the way we would. If the question was past tense, and you brought out in your opening that it is also present tense, that the Jewish people fear the future. Therefore, the question, if we rewrote it, is where is God? And I would have to go back. Who is God to them? Who are they esteeming as God? What's their mindset? Is it the Old Testament?
Are you talking now about the Orthodox Jews, or those Jews who believe in existence of God? Or you talk about the Jewish, again, the majority of the Jewish people don't believe in God. So
I'm doing nationality as much as I'm doing those who are studying the Scriptures. If they're studying the Scriptures, then they have the same God when I study the Scriptures.
I would say it's not nationality, it's ethnicity. So being Jewish, it's being born from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, plus historic memory, so cultural, our mind belonging to certain people. So it's being descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and sense of belonging to this descendant. Okay, I got it. I don't know. Was it how? I don't feel that that you got answer to your question. But if you ask about the Orthodox Jews, the God they believe in, that's the same. It's pretty the same God that Christians believe in. So the same qualities, the same characteristics, the same attributes to the main extent. What Christians call the Old Testament, it's the Hebrew Bible of the Jewish people. But you need to understand, as the Christianity today based its belief not just upon the Bible, but also upon the church tradition. And I'm not talking just about the Catholic Church. I'm talking about even Protestant churches, because Protestant churches, they in the Western world, they came out of the Catholic Church 500 years ago, and for a couple centuries the church was pretty Catholic, even Protestant church. And only in the last century or so, or 2 centuries, we got more flexibilities in how it's all going on. And today, new denomination appears in the world almost daily. But still, the church background, the Christianity, even Protestant, and even very evangelical and very neo-evangelical, and after post-evangelical Christianity, whatever way you call it, it's still based not just upon the Bible only. because there is no such thing as the Bible only. We see the Bible, we read and interpret Bible through the lenses of our culture and what was embedded. It's like building the church. Some churches say, "Oh, we are going to be the church of Acts chapter 2." Just forget about it, because Acts chapter 2 was 2,000 years ago. The circumstances are different today. But so the same as the Christianity is building themselves upon, even including including church fathers and creeds, etc. The same way Jewish community, even in stronger way, Orthodox Jewish community and culture, is built not just upon the Bible or the Old Testament, as it's called by Christians, not just upon Tanakh, but also the progressive revelation of God, or working, not revelation, not direct speech, but Him working through the rabbis of old. The same as the church believed that God was working through the church fathers and through the apostolic creeds, etc. So, in the same way, Jewish people believe, the Orthodox Jews, that God never was silent, even without talking directly, like Bat Kol, the voice from the heaven. He was dealing with the Jewish people through the rabbis and through the circumstances in history. So that's probably regarding here.
I'm learning so fast, and the conversation is so rich and deep. I almost forgot my question, but I think it goes back to what you were saying about the sovereignty of God, the overarching sovereignty of God's goodness and His direction. He's never silent. And to the Holocaust, back to the Holocaust, 6 million Jews tragically lose their lives in this. And as an evangelical Christian, we believe to die is gain. So what's the Jewish perspective on to die is gain, and what is heaven to them? Could they see that?
Well, it all depends if we deal with the liberal Jew or with conservative or Orthodox Jew. Religious Jews, Orthodox Jews, they do believe in the life after death, and in this life after death there is going to be a different place where we're going to spend the eternity to some extent. But Jewish rabbis were not so effective or not so creative as the Catholic theologians in describing the hell and the places for punishment. So we don't have the pictures of burning, all this stuff. We try not to have pictures at all. But still, there is the concept of life after death and the eternal reward. With liberal Jewish community, it's different. There is no, if you don't believe in God or if you're agnostic, there is no life after death. There is, but there is something like, it's very similar to like Gentile liberal community. It's like you will live forever in the memory of your children or generation. So leave your footprint on this earth for the future generations to remember you well. It's like I even saw a movie about Jesus like 20 years ago or something, where Jesus' resurrection was presented in the way that he died, but he is going to live. He resurrected in our minds, so we will remember him through the generations. So that's the concept. That's why for the Jewish people, even for liberal Jews, to be buried on a Jewish cemetery, it's a big issue, because that's the place your children, grandchildren, and so forth will come and remember you. There is something, and no, wait. First, there, I just try to remember the sequence.
I have a real question.
Oh, really? Okay.
So, how would never bring up the Holocaust with my Jewish friends. But if they bring it up, how can I engage them and be a good witness for the Lord?
Be very. It's a good question. Be very careful in determining what was the reason behind this question. Why are they asking this question? Is it like emotional question because they have their issues with the history, or they lost their family members, or they are even upset with God or history or whatever? It's one segment. It's more like emotional question, or they really want to be engaged in some quote-unquote philosophic discussion about the reasons of the Holocaust. From my experience, most of the time, this question is emotional. And with emotional question, you don't start a philosophical or theological conversation. With emotional question, you just express your compassion, your sorrow, your just sympathy. So just like, I'm sorry. I just like it's horrible, and etc. More challenging is to explain how to explain to another sort of emotional question is so you believe in Jesus, and but Christians are anti-Semites. So more challenging in this case to explain why the church. Why was the church anti-Semitic for so many centuries, and even today? Yeah, it's the case in many situations. And I teach seminars in this regard, and it's recorded. It can be watched on our JewishFriends.org website. So I don't have time now to deal with this question, unfortunately. Go ahead.
I remember I studied Bible one time. Somebody was mentioning, because the Jewish at that time, they were so obedient, and they God chose them to be a model, for the world. So he allowed those things to happen. But he was rescued Jewish, from the Roman Empire, and all those the examples in the Bible is talking about how God, using Jewish people to representing. But like one time I talked to one of my Jewish friends. She is a lady. She become a Christian Jew, so she don't go to. I asked her, "Why? How come you don't go to Jesus synagogue?" She said, "Oh, I'm a Christian Jew. They would not like me to be there." I said, "Oh," and I was invite her to Seder because I never know what Seder is, and she said, "Oh, that's not true. The day is wrong too. The time they was running, scattered, running away from Israel, and they said that the time Passover, the day is not exactly the time happened." I'm learning. I still don't know everything, and so, but I'm just saying, perhaps that Holocaust is really. God didn't really make that happen. This is the head, the German guy. He has so much hatred, and he just want to be powerful, in the world, and so he started killing. No matter, you are Jewish or someone, whatever you are in that territory, he just killed them all. He killed those disabled. He killed the old people, It's not just only kill the people who are smart.
It's something what shocked me, or really shocked me in Nuremberg in Germany one day, as I visited the museum related to Nazi parades there. Munich was the city where the Nazism was born. Berlin was the capital, and Nuremberg was like the temple city. because for sacred parades, Nazis were coming to Nuremberg. And in that museum there are pictures, big pictures, like posters, of people participating in these parades. And if you are there, or if you Google it online and can see these pictures, it's like an extreme, well, how to compare it? It's wrong comparison, but it's like in extreme worship, in an extreme, like maybe even very charismatic church. It's like they stand like this. They're like worshipping what was going on. They were doing sacrifices there. They were adoring their like martyrs. They were having their apostles. So it was what Nazis were doing. It was it was like anti-Christian, so to speak. It was a religion. It was not just a political system. It was a religion. It was not like powerful speaker Goebbels who could cry to the people who, you need to know Germans, they don't want to go to any war. They like to sit in their house, but he cries to them, do you want the total war? And everybody says, yes! That's crazy. That's insane. It was a religion. So the point is, I mentioned that previously. Hitler and the Nazis, they needed to kill. They had to kill Jewish people because they had, in their mind, they had to kill the God of Israel. They needed to destroy the Christianity. They needed to destroy the promises. So, and in order to make this, as they called, third or Dritte Reich, so third millennium, so to speak. So it's, again, it's like Christian concept. 1,000 years of reign. It's a Christian concept. They tried to install it. So Nazism was a religious system, anti-Christian, not anti-Christian, I don't mean against Christianity. It was like anti-Christ. It was replacement for Christianity. It was something like similar, but totally the opposite. So it's like was Christianity but minus. So the totally opposite, but religious system. And Jewish people didn't fit this system, because the Jewish people are the testimony of the God's existence. So just I think if we believe in God and His plan, and also in His enemy. And the one who wants to kill the human race, then we need to consider the Holocaust not just as man-made thing, but also a spiritual war that Jewish people got between the two parts. But that's part of our Jewish destiny, actually.
I learned, Jewish because they are multiplied, very prosperous, and then in German, they don't like them, be stronger than them, so they have to kill the Jewish, so in order to make sure the German, they are powerful.
Well, yeah.
The same lesson from the beginning is the same sin as wanting to be as the Most High God. It's Satan who perpetrated put in the minds and the hearts of these people the most horrendous things to do. It was incarnate evil and wanting to elevate themselves to a position as high as God.
Yes, and Hitler did believe that he is the Messiah. So that he never mentioned this terminology, but it's there. He is the savior of Germanic nation. So that was his perception of himself. Well, that's the spiritual aspect of that. But I'm coming back to the human aspect of this as well, because it's never, in Jewish mindset, it's almost never either or. It's both and, the holistic view, the holistic picture. So there is a spiritual war segment to that, but it's also human war in all this. It's evil in man that needs to be dealt with. There has to be a total transformation of a human being, of a man or woman, for the Holocaust not to happen again. So the evil was done not by God directly. We cannot blame God for this evil. It was done by men like you and me and women. So it was done by human beings, and it shows also the imperfection of the world we are living in, and it should show us that there is something we are to deal with.
To apply it for the evil. To apply the evil.
Yeah, it's also what Jewish people, the concept that got very, especially among more like Reform Jews, very popular concept after the Holocaust, mostly called Tikkun Olam, healing of this world. That's what we were talking. So we attempt to make this world a better place. It's on a human perspective, but if you stick with this human perspective only, then you will try to build the kingdom of God by your own abilities. But you cannot do it without God. In the 20th century, we had Nazis who tried to do that in their way. We had communists who tried to do it in their way. The communistic idea is Acts chapter 2, actually. It's the kingdom of God on earth without God being present in that. So we seen the attempts. It never helped. So we need to rely on God. We need to stick to Him, and at the same time we need to do what we ought to do. Both and this holistic picture. We need to finish in just a couple of minutes. I want to mention what I also did before, namely this idea of compassionate God. That's something what we shouldn't forget. It's very important. It's not the reason, but it's my personal sort of answer to the question, where was God during the Holocaust? And my answer is, and some of you who visited my seminars, they know this answer: God was with the Jewish people. He was in the gas chamber. He never abandoned His people. He was suffering with the Jewish people. So where was Jesus? If talking of the belief in Jesus, He was there, killing Jewish people. Nazis were trying to kill God. God was with His people. And for me, it's very important part of the theology of suffering. There is a Christian theological struggle. Is God passionate or impassionate? Can He have compassion or He can't? For me, I see Jesus in His compassion, and this word is mentioned several times in the New Testament, and I see that the fullness of God was present in Jesus. And I think that Jesus showed us that God is. And I think that God is my understanding where was God in the Holocaust is implied for the suffering of us in our daily life. He is there with us when we suffer. When we mourn, He sits Shiva with us, so He mourns with us. If we are sick, He is at our bed there. If we are alone, He walks with us. I think Holocaust teaches us of God, who in His divine plan chose to suffer. And
I think also it also teaches us about what the evil, we have to.
there are many lessons in all this.
Yeah.
There are many lessons. That's why with many attempts to answer the question, why did God allow the Holocaust to happen, the conservative Jewish scholars never came to a concrete, final answer. Some things remain a paradox. Some things we will understand when we will see Him face to face. But now it's helpful to learn. And to learn something for the Holocaust or things like that to never take place again, at least in what we can do about that. Well, it was great to be with you tonight. Possibly we will do something like that again. Maybe something like standing against rising anti-Semitism or things like this. We'll see. Keep tuned. Keep in touch. If I can be of help and you want to meet with me personally and discuss some questions that you have on your mind, get in touch with me. Would love to fellowship with you more. Thank you.